tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation. Harvey Stewart had built his life like he built his bridges, methodically, with precision, and designed to last. At 42, he commanded respect in the construction industry, not just for his engineering brilliance, but for his reputation as a man who never broke his word. His dark eyes held an intensity that made contractors nervous and clients confident. When Harvey Stewart shook your hand on a deal, it was better than any contract. 15 years ago, he'd married Jennifer Miller, the radiant daughter of construction mogul John Miller. Jennifer, with her golden hair and charming smile, had been the prize every man in their social circle coveted. Harvey had won her heart with his ambition and unwavering loyalty, qualities that her father, John, had immediately recognized and respected. John Miller had built Miller Construction from nothing into a regional powerhouse. At 68, with silver hair and weathered hands, he was finally ready to step down. Harvey had worked tirelessly for the past decade, transforming from son-in-law to indispensable partner. The company's most profitable contracts bore Harvey's signature. His innovative designs had won industry awards, and his project management had earned Miller Construction a reputation for delivering impossible builds on schedule. The Stewarts lived in a sprawling colonial in Westchester County, complete with a perfectly manicured lawn that Jennifer fussed over every weekend. Their two children, 15-year-old Michael and 13-year-old Sarah, attended private school and wanted for nothing. From the outside, Harvey Stewart had achieved the American dream. But Harvey had always been observant. Little things had started nagging at him over the past year. Jennifer's late nights shopping with friends, her newfound interest in fitness that required expensive personal training sessions, and her sudden criticism of his workaholic tendencies. She'd grown distant, answering his questions with rehearsed responses and avoiding his touch with practiced excuses. Then there was Kelvin Hart. Kelvin had joined Miller Construction 8 months ago as the new business development director. A smooth talker with perfectly styled dark hair and an expensive wardrobe that screamed new money. John had hired him despite Harvey's reservations, claiming they needed fresh blood to expand into new markets. Kelvin was younger, flashier, and had an MBA from Wharton that he mentioned in every conversation. Harvey had noticed how Jennifer's demeanor changed whenever Kelvin was around. How she laughed too loudly at his jokes during company events. How she'd started wearing perfume to casual family barbecues when Kelvin attended. How she developed opinions about business strategies she'd never cared about before. The signs were there, subtle but unmistakable to a man who built his career on paying attention to details others missed. Harvey had said nothing, waiting and watching, because Harvey Stewart was not a man who acted on suspicion. He acted on certainty. 3 weeks ago, Harvey had hired a private investigator, not some sleazy divorce specialist, but Roland Bruce, a former FBI agent who specialized in corporate intelligence. Roland's report sat locked in Harvey's office safe. 43 pages of documented proof that his wife of 15 years was having an affair with Kelvin Hart. Hotel receipts, photographs, credit card statements showing expensive gifts Harvey had never seen Jennifer wear at home. But the betrayal went deeper than adultery. According to Roland's investigation, Jennifer and Kelvin had been planning for months. John Miller's retirement party wasn't just a celebration. It was an ambush. The board meeting scheduled for the morning after the party would vote on Harvey's removal from the company. Kelvin would slide into Harvey's position. Jennifer would get a profitable divorce settlement, and Harvey would be left with nothing but the shame of his professional and personal failure. They'd underestimated him completely. Harvey closed the investigator's report and placed it back in his safe. Tomorrow night, at John Miller's retirement party, Jennifer would smile and tell him to grab the champagne. He would find that termination letter exactly as they planned. But what Jennifer and Kelvin didn't know was that Harvey Stewart had spent the last 3 weeks preparing his own surprise. He'd liquidated personal investments they didn't know about, moved assets Jennifer couldn't track, and made phone calls to people who owed him favors spanning 15 years in the industry. Harvey had built his reputation on loyalty and keeping his word, but he'd also built it on never forgetting a betrayal. As he sat in his study that evening, watching Jennifer read bedtime stories to Sarah through the window, Harvey felt no sadness. The time for sentiment had passed the moment she chose to conspire against him instead of simply asking for a divorce. Jennifer had declared war by involving his career, his reputation, and his relationship with John Miller. Harvey Stewart had never lost a war. Chapter 2. The Revelation. The Miller estate buzzed with celebration. 200 guests filled the grand ballroom, toasting John Miller's remarkable 40-year career. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over men in expensive suits and women draped in designer gowns. The who's who of the construction industry had gathered to honor a legend, and Harvey played his part perfectly, the devoted son-in-law, proud of his mentor's legacy. Jennifer looked stunning in her emerald dress, the one she'd claimed was for special occasions. Harvey now knew she'd worn it to her hotel meetings with Kelvin. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting compliments on her father's success while playing the role of supportive wife. Kelvin Hart worked the room like a predator marking territory. He'd positioned himself near the board members, laughing at their jokes and presenting himself as the future of Miller Construction. Harvey watched him with detached curiosity, noting how Kelvin's confidence had grown over the past month. The man actually believed he'd outmaneuvered Harvey Stewart. John Miller approached the podium for his speech, his voice carrying the weight of 4 decades in business. "Building isn't just about concrete and steel," he said, his eyes finding Harvey in the crowd. "It's about trust, loyalty, and legacy. I'm proud to pass this company to people who understand those values." The irony wasn't lost on Harvey. John genuinely believed he was protecting the company by removing his son-in-law. Jennifer had poisoned her father's mind with carefully crafted stories about Harvey's declining performance and concerning judgment calls. Kelvin had provided the business case, presenting a restructuring plan that painted Harvey as a liability rather than an asset. As the applause died down, Jennifer appeared at Harvey's side, her smile radiant for the cameras. "Honey," she said, her voice honey-sweet with false affection, "would you grab a champagne from the coat check? Father wants to make a private toast with the family." Harvey nodded, playing his part one final time. "Of course, darling." The coat check area was dimly lit and empty. Harvey found the box Jennifer had described, wrapped in gold paper with an elegant bow. His hands were steady as he opened it, though his heart rate didn't change when he saw the contents. The termination letter was typed on Miller Construction letterhead, signed by all 7 board members. His final paycheck lay beneath it, along with a sticky note in Jennifer's handwriting. The board voted. "You're fired." For a moment, Harvey simply stared at the note, not at the words, but at Jennifer's handwriting, the same script that had written "I love you" in birthday cards for 15 years. The same hand that had signed Christmas cards to the Stewart family every year. The same hand that had written their wedding vows. Harvey folded the letter carefully and placed it in his jacket pocket. Then he pulled out his phone and made the call he'd been planning for 3 weeks. "Bruce, it's Harvey Stewart. Execute Phase 1. When he returned to the ballroom, the family had gathered in John Miller's private study. Jennifer stood beside her father, radiant with victory. Kelvin lingered near the bookshelf, trying to look casual while clearly savoring the moment. John held a bottle of Dom Perignon, waiting for Harvey's return. "There's my boy," John said warmly. "One last toast between family before I officially step down." Harvey smiled, accepting the crystal flute. "To family," he said, raising his glass, "and to getting exactly what we deserve." They drank, and Harvey watched Jennifer's eyes. She was practically glowing with triumph, probably imagining the life she'd build with Kelvin, using Harvey's destroyed reputation as their foundation. Neither she nor Kelvin noticed that Harvey's phone was buzzing constantly in his pocket. "Well," Harvey said, setting down his empty glass, "I should let you all enjoy the rest of the evening. I have some calls to make." He kissed Jennifer's cheek. She actually leaned into it, still playing the loving wife, even in her moment of victory, and shook John's hand. "Thank you for everything, John. You've taught me more than you know." As Harvey walked toward the exit, he felt his phone vibrating again. By morning, 37 missed calls from Bruce Andrews, Miller Construction's corporate lawyer, would be waiting. But tonight, Harvey Stewart was driving home to set Phase 2 in motion. Jennifer and Kelvin had won the battle, but they'd made a critical error. They thought Harvey Stewart was just another casualty of corporate politics. They were about to learn that Harvey Stewart was a man who built bridges, and a man who knew exactly how to burn them down. Chapter 3. The Architect's Plan. Harvey's home office had been transformed into a war room. 3 laptops hummed quietly on his desk, displaying financial reports, legal documents, and construction project timelines. The investigator's report lay open beside a yellow legal pad filled with Harvey's meticulous handwriting. He'd been working since 4 a.m., and by dawn, the foundation of his counterattack was complete. The first call came at 6:23 a.m. Bruce Andrews, Miller Construction's corporate lawyer, sounded panicked. "Harvey, where the hell are you? We need to talk." The Riverside Municipal Project, Jesus Christ, Harvey, the entire contract is structured around your personal engineering license. If you're terminated, we're in breach of a $40 million project. The city can sue us for 3 times that amount. Harvey let the call go to voicemail. Then the next one, and the next. By 7 a.m., his phone showed 13 missed calls from Bruce, 11 from John Miller, and surprisingly, 7 from Kelvin Hart. Jennifer had called twice, her voice progressing from confused to furious. At exactly 8 a.m., Harvey answered his phone. "Harvey Stewart." "Harvey, thank God. This is Bruce. We have a situation. That termination letter. There are complications we didn't anticipate. Several major contracts are tied to your personal certifications. We need to discuss a transition plan." "I'm afraid that's impossible, Bruce. My termination was effective immediately, according to the board's decision. I'm no longer a Miller Construction employee. But the contracts are Miller Construction's responsibility, not mine. I was just an employee, remember? Good luck with the lawsuits." Harvey ended the call and immediately placed another one. "Eugene, it's Harvey Stewart. Yes, I know it's early. I'm ready to discuss your offer." Eugene Bender was Harvey's former MIT roommate and current CEO of Bender Engineering, one of the largest construction firms on the East Coast. For 2 years, Eugene had been trying to poach Harvey from Miller Construction with increasingly generous offers. Harvey had always declined out of loyalty to John Miller. Loyalty was no longer a factor. The conversation lasted 47 minutes. When it ended, Harvey Stewart was the new chief engineering officer of Bender Engineering, with a salary 30% higher than his Miller Construction pay, equity in the company, and a signing bonus that made the termination payout look like pocket change. More importantly, his new contract included a non-compete clause that prevented him from working on any projects that might compete with Bender Engineering. Every major project in Miller Construction's pipeline would now face a conflict of interest challenge if they tried to replace Harvey with another firm that employed him. Harvey's phone rang again. John Miller this time. "Harvey, son, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding, John. I received my termination letter last night. It was quite clear. The board made that decision based on some concerns about." "The board made that decision based on bad information," Harvey interrupted. "Information provided by people who don't understand the complexity of our current contracts. But that's not my problem anymore. Harvey, please. Whatever Jennifer told you about last night." "Jennifer told me to grab the champagne. I did. Everything else I learned from the termination letter you signed." There was a long pause. "The Riverside project is a Miller Construction project. I'm sure Kelvin Hart has it well in hand. He did present himself as my replacement, didn't he?" After ending the call, Harvey walked to his safe and removed a manila folder he'd prepared 3 weeks ago. Inside were copies of every contract, every project detail, and every engineering specification that made Harvey Stewart irreplaceable. Not the originals. Those belonged to Miller Construction. But Harvey's memory, his personal notes, and his understanding of structural requirements couldn't be terminated with a letter. His phone rang again. "Jennifer. Harvey, where are you? I woke up and you were gone." "Your car is in the shop," Harvey lied smoothly. "I took a cab to the office to clean out my desk." "About last night." "What about it?" "Your father's retirement party was lovely. Very memorable." "Harvey, I know you're upset about the company restructuring, but I'm not upset, Jennifer. I'm making new plans. We should talk when I get home. But Harvey had no intention of going home. Not yet. He had 3 more calls to make, and then a meeting with his new employer. By the time Jennifer realized the scope of what her betrayal had cost, Harvey Stewart would be 30 miles away, designing the destruction of everything she thought she'd won. The last call was to Roland Bruce, his investigator. Roland? It's Harvey. I need you to expand the surveillance. I want to know every move they make, every conversation they have, and every person they contact. And Roland? Start Phase 3. Phase 3 was Harvey's favorite part of the plan. While Jennifer and Kelvin celebrated their corporate coup, they were about to discover that Harvey Stewart was not just an engineer. He was an architect, and he'd been designing their downfall for 3 weeks. They thought they'd fired Harvey Stewart. What they'd actually done was unleash him. Chapter 4. The Foundation Cracks. The Bender Engineering offices occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in downtown Hartford, 40 miles from the Miller Construction headquarters. Harvey's new corner office overlooked the Connecticut River, and from his window, he could see construction sites where his designs were reshaping the skyline. Eugene Bender had welcomed him like a conquering hero, and by noon, Harvey was already reviewing project proposals that would make Miller Construction's pipeline look modest. His former phone continued buzzing with calls he didn't answer. Instead, Harvey focused on his new responsibilities while Roland Bruce fed him real-time intelligence about the chaos erupting at his former workplace. Jennifer had arrived at Miller Construction at 10 a.m., expecting to find Harvey clearing out his office in defeat. Instead, she found pandemonium. Bruce Andrews was shouting into 3 phones simultaneously. John Miller was locked in emergency meetings with the board, and Kelvin Hart was frantically reviewing contracts he'd never properly understood. The Riverside Municipal Project was the immediate crisis. The city had invested $40 million in Harvey's innovative bridge design, which required his personal engineering seal and ongoing supervision. Miller Construction's termination of Harvey triggered a breach of contract clause that exposed them to liquidated damages exceeding $100 million. But Riverside was just the beginning. Harvey had spent 15 years building relationships with municipal planners, state transportation departments, and federal project managers. His reputation had opened doors that Miller Construction couldn't have accessed otherwise. The company's most prestigious contracts, the Metro-North Railway expansion, the Harbor Restoration Project, the new courthouse complex, all contained provisions that made Harvey's involvement essential. Kelvin Hart was discovering that business development meant more than PowerPoint presentations and networking lunches. The technical specifications Harvey had developed couldn't be replicated by reading his files. The relationships Harvey had cultivated couldn't be transferred with a handshake. The innovation that had made Miller Construction a premier firm was walking out the door in a custom-tailored suit. At 2 p.m., Harvey's assistant knocked on his office door. "Mr. Stewart? There's a Jennifer Stewart here to see you. She says she's your wife." Harvey looked up from the structural plans he was reviewing for a casino project in Atlantic City, a project Miller Construction had bid on but lost to Bender Engineering 6 months ago. "Send her in." Jennifer entered like a woman walking into battle. Her designer suit was armor, her smile was a weapon, and her eyes held the cold calculation Harvey had failed to see for too many years. She was beautiful, brilliant, and absolutely furious. "Hello, darling," she said, closing the door behind her. "Lovely new office. Very impressive. Thank you." Eugene spared no expense. "Eugene Bender, your new employer." Jennifer moved to the window, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Funny how quickly you found a new position. Almost like you were planning this." Harvey leaned back in his leather chair, studying his wife with the same attention he gave structural blueprints. "Planning what? Finding work after being terminated? I'd call that basic financial responsibility. Don't play games with me, Harvey. The Riverside project is falling apart. 3 other contracts are in jeopardy. Daddy's company is facing lawsuits that could destroy 40 years of work. And what does that have to do with me? I was terminated yesterday, remember? Miller Construction made it clear that my services were no longer needed." Jennifer's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the fury beneath. You're sabotaging the company out of spite. I'm protecting my professional reputation. Every contract I signed was based on my personal guarantee of engineering excellence. If Miller Construction no longer wants my involvement, they can't use my reputation to secure their projects. The board is willing to reconsider the termination. Daddy wants to offer you a partnership, full restoration of your position, even a raise. How generous, Harvey interrupted. And what changed their minds? Yesterday, I was a liability who needed immediate removal. Today, I'm partnership material. Jennifer's composure cracked further. Harvey, please. Whatever you think you know. I know that Kelvin Hart presented a business case for my removal 3 weeks ago. I know that you supported that recommendation. I know that you orchestrated last night's humiliation because you thought it would be dramatic and decisive. Jennifer stared at him, her face pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. How could you possibly know about your affair? Harvey's voice remained conversational, but his eyes held the cold precision that made contractors nervous. Jennifer, I've known for months. Did you really think I wouldn't notice the late nights, the new clothes, the way you light up whenever Kelvin enters a room? The silence stretched between them like a suspension cable under tension. Jennifer's breathing was shallow, her hands clenched at her sides. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. If you knew, why didn't you say anything? Because I needed to understand the scope of the betrayal. An affair is personal. Destroying my career was business. The moment you made it business, you declared war. Harvey stood and walked to his window, looking out at the construction sites below. I built Miller Construction's reputation. I designed the projects that made your father proud. I created the innovations that separated his company from every competitor. And you threw all of that away for what? Better sex? A younger man? The thrill of betrayal? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Harvey turned to face her, and Jennifer stepped backward involuntarily. The man looking at her wasn't the devoted husband who'd brought her coffee every morning for 15 years. This was Harvey Stewart, the engineer, calculating load-bearing capacities and stress points with mathematical precision. You wanted me destroyed, Jennifer. You're about to learn what that actually looks like. Jennifer's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, and her face went white. What is it? Harvey asked, though he already knew. Roland Bruce was very punctual. It's Kelvin. He says there's been a problem with the Metro North project. Some kind of inspection issue. Harvey smiled for the first time since the conversation began. Phase 4 just started. Chapter 5, Structural Failure. Kelvin Hart's office at Miller Construction looked like a hurricane had blown through it. Legal documents covered his desk, his laptop displayed 17 different crisis management emails, and his trash can overflowed with crumpled pages of calculations he couldn't make work. The man who'd been so confident 48 hours ago now looked like he hadn't slept since Jennifer's revelation about Harvey's knowledge. The Metro North Railway expansion had hit its first major snag at 3:47 p.m. State transportation inspectors had arrived unannounced to review Harvey's innovative rail junction design. The problem wasn't with the engineering. Harvey's work was flawless. The problem was that Kelvin Hart couldn't explain it. The lead inspector, Miguel Fritz, was a 20-year veteran who'd worked with Harvey on 6 previous projects. He knew Harvey's methodology, trusted his calculations, and expected to discuss technical specifications with the project's chief engineer. Instead, he found Kelvin fumbling through files and making excuses about Harvey's sudden departure. Where is Harvey Stewart? Miguel had asked. Mr. Stewart is no longer with the company, Kelvin replied, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Since when? Since yesterday. Miguel Fritz had stared at Kelvin for a long moment, then made a phone call. 30 minutes later, the entire Metro North project was placed under regulatory review, pending verification of the engineering specifications by the original designer. Harvey learned about this development from his new office, where he was enjoying a cup of coffee and designing a more efficient rail junction for a competing bid. Eugene Bender had been delighted to learn that Miller Construction's Metro North project was in jeopardy. Bender Engineering had submitted the original low bid for that contract, but lost to Miller Construction's innovative design. Harvey's innovative design. His phone rang at 4:15 p.m. John Miller. Harvey, please. Miguel Fritz says the Metro North project can't proceed without your direct involvement. The state won't accept Kelvin's oversight. That's unfortunate, Harvey said, not looking up from his blueprints. But I'm sure Miller Construction can find another qualified engineer. You know, there isn't another engineer in the region who understands that rail junction design. You created something completely new. I did, and I own the intellectual property for that innovation. It's part of my personal engineering portfolio, not Miller Construction's assets. The silence on the other end was deafening. Harvey could practically hear John Miller's world collapsing. Harvey, son, what do you want? Name your price. Partnership, equity, complete project control. I want you to honor the termination letter your board signed. I want Miller Construction to live with the consequences of their decision. And I want Jennifer to explain to you exactly why I'll never work for your company again. Harvey ended the call and immediately placed another one. Roland? How's our friend Kelvin handling the pressure? Not well, Roland's gravelly voice replied. He's made 7 calls to headhunters in the past 2 hours. Looks like he's planning an exit strategy. Excellent. And Jennifer just left her father's office. She looked like she'd been crying. Should I continue surveillance? Absolutely. I want to know where she goes, who she sees, and what she does, especially if she meets with Kelvin. Harvey had anticipated this moment. Jennifer and Kelvin had built their relationship on shared ambition and mutual betrayal. When that ambition crumbled, the relationship would follow. People who could betray a spouse, an employer wouldn't hesitate to betray each other when the stakes got high enough. At 6 p.m., Harvey's prediction proved accurate. Roland sent a text. Subjects meeting at the Meridian Hotel, room 1247. Same room they've used for 3 months. Harvey left his office and drove through Hartford's evening traffic, not toward the hotel, but toward the suburbs where his children waited for dinner. Michael and Sarah deserved to hear about their parents' divorce from their father, not from gossip or legal papers. They were innocents in this war, and Harvey intended to protect them from the worst of what was coming. But first, he had a stop to make. The Meridian Hotel's lobby was elegant and discreet, exactly the kind of place where successful professionals conducted private business. Harvey walked through it like he belonged there, nodding to the concierge and taking the elevator to the 12th floor. He didn't go to room 1247. He went to room 1249, which Roland had reserved under a false name 3 hours earlier. The adjoining rooms shared a thin wall, and Roland's surveillance equipment could pick up conversations clearly. Harvey put on headphones and listened to his wife and her lover discuss their crumbling plans. Can't handle the technical aspects, Jennifer was saying. Daddy's furious. The board is talking about emergency restructuring. I never said I could replace Harvey's engineering expertise, Kelvin replied. I said I could handle the business development side while we found technical contractors. We don't have time for contractors. We have deadlines, penalties, lawsuits. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to destroy your husband's career for fun. There was a sharp crack, the sound of Jennifer slapping Kelvin across the face. Don't you dare blame this on me. You wanted Harvey gone as much as I did. You said he was holding the company back from modern business practices. I said the company needed fresh leadership. I didn't say we should fire the one man who makes our projects work. Harvey smiled in the darkness. The foundation was cracking exactly as he designed it. So what do we do now? Jennifer asked. We salvage what we can. I'll take a position with another firm. You'll divorce Harvey quietly, and we'll rebuild somewhere else. And my father's company will survive or it won't. That's not our problem anymore. There it was. The moment Harvey had been waiting for. Jennifer and Kelvin weren't just betraying him. They were abandoning John Miller too. The old man who'd welcomed Kelvin like a son and trusted his daughter's judgment was about to discover that loyalty meant nothing to the people he'd tried to help. Harvey removed the headphones and left the hotel. He had one more call to make, and then he would go home to have dinner with his children. Tomorrow, Phase 5 would begin, and Jennifer would learn that Harvey Stewart hadn't just been building a career for 15 years. He'd been building an empire. Chapter 6, The Weight of Truth. Harvey found his children in the family room, sprawled across the sectional sofa with homework spread between them. Michael was hunched over trigonometry problems, while Sarah worked on a science project about bridge construction, a coincidence that would have made Harvey smile under different circumstances. "Dad," Sarah looked up, her face brightening. "I'm doing my project on suspension bridges. Want to help? Maybe later, sweetheart. Right now, I need to talk to both of you about something important." Michael closed his math book, immediately sensing the gravity in his father's tone. At 15, he'd inherited Harvey's analytical mind and Jennifer's social instincts. Sarah, at 13, was more artistic but equally perceptive. Harvey sat across from them, choosing his words carefully. "Your mother and I are going to get divorced." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's pencil slipped from her fingers. Michael's face went pale. "Is it because of your job?" Michael asked quietly. "Mom said you got fired yesterday." "The job situation is complicated, but no. Your mother and I have been having problems for a while. We've grown apart, and we want different things now." Harvey wouldn't tell them about the affair. Not yet, maybe never. Children shouldn't carry the weight of their parents' betrayals. But they deserve to understand that their world was changing. "Where will we live?" Sarah's voice was small, scared. "That's still being decided. But no matter what happens, both of your parents love you completely. This divorce is about problems between your mother and me, not about either of you." Michael leaned forward, his expression serious beyond his years. "Dad, are you okay? You look different." Harvey studied his son's face, seeing Jennifer's features combined with his own determination. "I'm handling a lot of changes right now, but I want you both to know that I'll always take care of you. Always." They talked for another hour, Harvey answering their questions as honestly as possible without revealing the scope of the war brewing around them. When Jennifer arrived home at 8:30 p.m., she found Harvey helping Sarah with her bridge project while Michael worked nearby. "Harvey," Jennifer's voice was careful, controlled. "Could I speak with you privately?" They moved to Harvey's study, where the investigator's report still lay in his open safe. Jennifer noticed it immediately. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked. 3 weeks. Since I confirmed what I'd suspected for months." Jennifer sank into the chair across from his desk, suddenly looking older than her 38 years. "The children know we're getting divorced. They don't know why, and they won't unless you make it necessary. Harvey, please. Maybe we can work this out. Counseling, therapy. You conspired with your lover to destroy my career at your father's retirement party. You wanted me humiliated publicly, professionally ruined, and emotionally devastated. There's nothing to work out." Jennifer's composure finally cracked completely. Tears ran down her cheeks, smearing her carefully applied makeup. "I never meant for it to go this far. Kelvin said it would be quick, clean, that you'd land on your feet. Kelvin Hart is a coward who's already planning to abandon you and your father's company. He told you exactly what you wanted to hear because he wanted exactly what you were offering. That's not true. It's exactly true. And Jennifer? It gets worse." Harvey opened his laptop and turned the screen toward her. The display showed surveillance photos from Meridian Hotel, time-stamped just hours earlier. Jennifer and Kelvin in heated argument, her hand frozen mid-slap across his face. "He's already starting to blame you for the company's problems. By next week, he'll be interviewing for positions at other firms. By next month, he'll be telling people that the affair was your idea, that you seduced him away from his professional judgment." Jennifer stared at the photos, her face cycling through shock, anger, and finally, understanding. "You've been watching us. I've been protecting myself. Everything I've done has been in response to your actions. You declared war, Jennifer. I'm simply better at fighting it. What do you want from me?" Harvey closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. "I want you to understand what you've lost. Tomorrow, Miller Construction will face its second major contract review. By Friday, your father will be looking at lawsuit exposure that could bankrupt the company. Next week, every major project in their pipeline will be in jeopardy. And you could stop all of that. I could, but I won't. Even if it destroys my father? He never hurt you, Harvey. He loved you like a son. John Miller signed my termination letter based on lies you, and Kelvin fed him. He chose to trust his daughter and her lover over 15 years of loyalty and results. That was his choice." Jennifer was quiet for a long moment, processing the scope of the destruction Harvey had unleashed. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. What about us? What about our family? We haven't been a family for months. We've been strangers living in the same house, playing roles for the children's benefit. The only difference now is that I'm not pretending anymore. Harvey stood and walked to his safe, removing a manila envelope he'd prepared that morning. Divorce papers. I'm keeping the house, my personal investments, and primary custody of the children. You'll receive spousal support for 5 years, enough to maintain a reasonable lifestyle while you rebuild your career. Primary custody? Jennifer's voice sharpened. You can't just take my children. I can and I will. The investigators' report documents your affair in detail. Your conspiracy to destroy my career shows calculated dishonesty. No family court judge will award primary custody to a mother who prioritized her lover over her family's stability. Jennifer took the envelope with shaking hands. Harvey, please. Don't do this. Don't destroy everything out of anger. Harvey walked to the door of his study, then paused and looked back at his wife of 15 years. I'm not destroying anything, Jennifer. I'm just letting you live with the consequences of what you built. As Jennifer sat alone in the study, Harvey returned to the family room to help Sarah finish her bridge project. Tomorrow would bring new crises, fresh revelations, and a next phase of his carefully constructed revenge. But tonight, he would be the father his children needed while their world fell apart around them. The foundation Jennifer and Kelvin had tried to destroy was proving stronger than they'd imagined. The structure they'd built their betrayal on was about to collapse completely. Chapter 7. The Collapse. The Miller Construction Emergency Board meeting convened at 7 a.m. on Friday morning, 3 days after John Miller's retirement party. The conference room that had hosted celebratory toasts just 72 hours earlier now felt like a funeral parlor. 7 board members sat around the mahogany table, their faces grim as Bruce Andrews delivered the legal assessment. Gentlemen, we're looking at potential liability exceeding $200 million. The Riverside Municipal Project alone carries liquidated damages of $112 million. Metro North is under regulatory review, which could trigger federal penalties. The Harbor Restoration Project is on hold pending engineering verification. John Miller sat at the head of the table, his retirement celebration photos still displayed on the credenza behind him. He looked like he'd age a decade in 3 days. How did this happen? Asked Carlton Glenn, the company's chief financial officer. Harvey Stewart was supposed to be a liability. Kelvin Hart assured us that replacing him would improve efficiency. All eyes turned to Kelvin, who sat at the far end of the table looking like a man facing execution. His confident demeanor had evaporated completely, replaced by nervous sweat and darting glances toward the door. The business case was sound, Kelvin said weakly. No one anticipated that Harvey would react this way. React this way? John Miller's voice carried a dangerous edge. Son, Harvey didn't react. He planned. Every contract he signed included personal guarantees that made him irreplaceable. Every project he designed required his ongoing involvement. He built safeguards that protected the company and protected himself. But the restructuring plan was written by someone who didn't understand our business. John interrupted. Someone who thought construction was like any other industry where you could replace expertise with enthusiasm. Bruce Andrews cleared his throat. There's more. Harvey Stewart filed a defamation lawsuit yesterday afternoon. He's claiming that his termination was based on false information designed to damage his professional reputation. That's impossible, Kelvin said quickly. What false information? According to the lawsuit, you told the board that Harvey had made questionable judgment calls and shown declining performance. Harvey's filing includes performance reviews, client testimonials, and project success metrics that contradict every claim in your restructuring proposal. The room fell silent except for the humming of the air conditioning. Carlton Glenn was the first to speak. Kelvin, did you fabricate evidence against Harvey Stewart? I didn't fabricate anything. I presented concerns about leadership style, resistance to modern business practices. Show me documentation, John Miller said coldly. Show me one performance review, one client complaint, One project failure that supports a recommendation. Kelvin's face went white. It wasn't about documentation. It was about vision, about moving the company forward. It was about removing Harvey so you could take his position, Carlton said. And you convinced us to commit corporate suicide to make it happen. John Miller stood slowly, his hands flat on the conference table. Kelvin, you're terminated. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You can't do this. I have a contract. Your contract has a clause about material misrepresentation. You lied to this board about Harvey Stewart to advance your own career. That constitutes fraud. As security led Kelvin from the building, John Miller turned to Bruce Andrews. Can we fix this? Can we bring Harvey back? I've been trying to reach him all week. He won't take calls from anyone associated with Miller Construction. His attorney says he's only interested in discussing his defamation lawsuit. What would it take to settle that lawsuit? Public vindication, financial compensation, and a formal apology from the board for accepting false information about his performance. Done. What else? Bruce Andrews looked uncomfortable. John, Harvey doesn't want to come back. Bender Engineering announced his hiring yesterday. Full partnership, equity stake, and control over their East Coast expansion. He's not just employed. He's positioned to become our primary competitor. The reality of the situation settled over the room like concrete hardening. Harvey Stewart wasn't just leaving Miller Construction. He was joining their biggest rival with complete knowledge of their operations, their clients, and their vulnerabilities. There's something else, Bruce added quietly. Jennifer called this morning. She wanted to discuss the divorce settlement Harvey proposed. She seems to think the company might be able to influence his decisions. John Miller's face went ashen. What divorce settlement? Your daughter didn't tell you? Harvey filed for divorce on Wednesday. He's seeking primary custody of the children and alleging adultery as grounds. The silence that followed was broken only by Carlton Glenn's sharp intake of breath. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. Jennifer was having an affair. With Kelvin Hart, Bruce confirmed. Harvey's been building a case for months. He has documentation, surveillance, everything he needs to prove infidelity and conspiracy. John Miller sank back into his chair, his face gray. My own daughter conspired against Harvey? According to Harvey's attorney, Jennifer actively participated in planning his termination. She knew about Kelvin's false claims and supported them. The room erupted in angry voices, board members demanding explanations and assigning blame. But John Miller sat in silence, staring at the retirement photos that now seemed to mock him. His celebration had been built on a foundation of lies, and the son-in-law he'd trusted like his own blood had been betrayed by his own daughter. At exactly 9 a.m., as the board meeting descended into chaos, Harvey Stewart was 50 miles away in his new office, reviewing architectural plans for a casino complex in Atlantic City. His secretary had delivered 17 messages from Miller Construction personnel, all of which he'd ignored. Instead, Harvey was focused on the future. Bender Engineering had just won 3 major contracts previously held by Miller Construction competitors. By leveraging Harvey's reputation and relationships, Eugene Bender was positioning his firm to dominate the regional market. Harvey's phone buzzed with a text from Roland Bruce. Kelvin Hart terminated. Jennifer meeting with divorce attorney at 10 a.m. John Miller requesting emergency meeting with you. Harvey typed back, no meetings. Continue surveillance. Prepare Phase 6. Phase 6 was the final component of Harvey's plan, and it would ensure that Jennifer and Kelvin's betrayal had permanent consequences. They thought they were playing a simple game of corporate politics and marital infidelity. They were about to learn that Harvey Stewart played a much longer, more complex game. A game that he always won. Chapter 8, The Reckoning. Jennifer sat in her car outside the law offices of Mitchell Conley, trying to summon the courage to walk inside. The divorce attorney Harvey had recommended was supposedly fair but thorough, which, coming from Harvey, probably meant he would dissect her life with surgical precision. Her phone buzzed with another call from her father. She'd been avoiding him since Wednesday night, unable to face the disappointment and anger in his voice. The empire John Miller had spent 40 years building was crumbling because his daughter had chosen passion over loyalty. Inside the law office, Mitchell calmly reviewed Harvey's proposal with professional detachment. At 62, he'd handled hundreds of divorce cases, but this one was particularly complex. Mrs. Stewart, your husband's settlement offer is comprehensive. He's documented extensive evidence of adultery, and his filings suggest premeditation in the destruction of his career. Premeditation, the timing of your affair correlating with business decisions affecting his employment. The coordinated effort to remove him from Miller Construction while you were involved with his replacement. It creates a pattern that suggests calculated betrayal rather than spontaneous infidelity. Jennifer stared at the legal documents spread across the conference table. What does that mean for me? It means your husband has built a case that portrays you not just as an unfaithful spouse, but as someone who actively conspired against your family's financial security. That significantly impacts custody considerations and spousal support calculations. But I'm their mother. You're a mother who prioritized her affair over her children's stability. The evidence shows you were planning to leave their father financially and professionally destroyed. No judge will ignore that when determining what's in the children's best interests. Jennifer's hands shook as she signed document after document, each one a testament to how thoroughly Harvey had outmaneuvered her. The custody arrangement gave her every other weekend and one evening per week. The spousal support would last 5 years and decrease annually. The house, the savings, the investments, everything stayed with Harvey. There is one unusual provision, Mitchell noted. Your husband is requiring that you sign a detailed statement acknowledging your role in his termination from Miller Construction. What kind of statement? A sworn affidavit admitting that you provided false information about his performance to justify his removal. It will be part of his defamation lawsuit against the company. Jennifer read the affidavit with growing horror. Every detail was accurate. Her conversations with Kelvin about Harvey's outdated approaches, her suggestions to her father about modernizing leadership, her active participation in building the case for Harvey's termination. If I sign this, what happens? Your husband drops his demands for additional punitive measures. If you refuse to sign it. Mitchell paused, consulting his notes. He's prepared to seek full custody and eliminate spousal support entirely. Jennifer signed the affidavit. Meanwhile, across town, Kelvin Hart was having his own reckoning. The security guards had escorted him from Miller Construction with nothing but the personal items from his desk. His corporate credit cards were canceled, his company car was repossessed, and his reputation in the industry was toxic. The headhunters he'd contacted earlier in the week were no longer returning his calls. Word had spread quickly through the tight-knit construction community that Kelvin Hart had fabricated evidence against Harvey Stewart, one of the most respected engineers in the region. No reputable firm would risk their credibility by hiring him. His apartment lease was in Jennifer's name, a precaution they'd taken to keep their affair discreet. With Jennifer facing her own financial constraints, Kelvin found himself without income, without prospects, and without allies. At 3 p.m., Kelvin made a desperate decision. He drove to Bender Engineering and requested a meeting with Harvey Stewart. Harvey agreed to see him. The Bender Engineering conference room was stark and modern, nothing like the warm mahogany atmosphere of Miller Construction. Harvey sat across from Kelvin with the same professional courtesy he'd shown to hundreds of contractors over the years. "What can I do for you, Kelvin?" "Harvey, I need you to know that the whole thing got out of hand. I never intended for it to go as far as it did." "You mean the affair or the conspiracy to destroy my career?" "Both. Neither. Look, Jennifer and I, it started as just attraction, but then she began talking about how you were holding the company back, how her father needed fresh leadership. I thought I was helping." Harvey leaned back in his chair, studying Kelvin with the analytical gaze that had made him successful. "You thought you were helping by lying about my performance? By fabricating evidence of poor judgment? I thought if you left voluntarily, everyone would benefit. You'd find a better position, the company would modernize, Jennifer would be happier. You thought you'd get my job, my wife, and my life. Everything else was just justification." Kelvin's composure cracked. "Please, Harvey, I know I fucked up, but I'm destroyed. No one will hire me. Jennifer won't even take my calls. I'm facing bankruptcy. And what would you like me to do about that?" Recommend me. Vouch for my business development skills. Help me find a position somewhere that I can rebuild. Harvey was quiet for a long moment, considering the broken man across from him. When he finally spoke, his voice held no anger, no satisfaction, just cold, mathematical precision. Kelvin, you try to destroy my career, my marriage, and my relationship with my children. You convinced my wife to betray me and my father-in-law to discard me. You built your future on the ruins of my life. I know, and I'm sorry. I don't want your apology. I want you to understand something about consequences. Every choice has them. Every action creates reactions. You chose to betray me, and now you're living with what that choice created. Harvey stood and walked to the window overlooking the construction sites below. But you're right about one thing. You are destroyed. Your career is over. Your relationship with Jennifer is finished. Your reputation is permanently damaged. He turned back to face Kelvin. And that's exactly what you deserve. Harvey, please. You can go now. Security will escort you out. As Kelvin was led from the building, Harvey returned to his desk and made one final call. Roland? Phase 7. It's time to close the circle. Phase 7 was Harvey's ultimate gift to himself. The complete and total victory that would ensure neither Jennifer nor Kelvin could ever threaten him again. They destroyed his trust, his marriage, and his relationship with John Miller. Now Harvey Stewart would destroy them completely. Chapter 9. The Last Foundation. 6 months later, Harvey Stewart stood in his new office at Bender Engineering's expanded headquarters, reviewing the quarterly reports that showed his division's unprecedented success. The regional construction industry had experienced a dramatic reshuffling, with Miller Construction losing 60% of its major contracts and Bender Engineering emerging as the dominant firm in the Northeast. John Miller had been forced to sell Miller Construction to a Chicago-based corporation that immediately restructured the company, laying off 40% of the workforce. The proud family business that had taken 40 years to build was now just another subsidiary in a corporate portfolio. Harvey felt no satisfaction in the old man's downfall, but he felt no regret either. John Miller had made his choice when he signed that termination letter. The consequences were simply mathematics, actions and reactions, causes and effects. His children had adapted better than he'd expected. Michael, now 16, spent his weekends working on construction sites, learning the business from the ground up under Harvey's direct supervision. Sarah had thrown herself into her bridge-building projects with renewed passion, already talking about studying engineering like her father. Jennifer had moved to a modest apartment in Hartford, where she worked as a real estate agent for a small firm. The spousal support Harvey provided was sufficient but not generous, enough to maintain dignity, but not enough to fund the lifestyle she'd enjoyed during their marriage. She saw the children according to the court-mandated schedule, but the easy intimacy of their family relationships had been permanently altered. Kelvin Hart had disappeared entirely. Roland Bruce's final surveillance report indicated that he'd left Connecticut for parts unknown, probably using an assumed name to avoid the creditors and former colleagues who wanted answers about his role in Miller Construction's collapse. Some men rebuilt after destroying their lives. Others simply vanished. Kelvin had chosen the latter. Harvey's phone buzzed with a call from Eugene Bender. Harvey, we just landed the Atlantic City Casino project. Congratulations, your design beat out 6 other firms, including some heavy hitters from New York. Thank you, Eugene. I'll have the preliminary specifications ready for review next week. There's something else. The Miller Construction properties are going up for auction next month. The old headquarters building, the equipment yards, even some of the residential developments John Miller started. Interested, Harvey considered the offer. Buying Miller Construction's assets would complete his victory in a poetic way. The company that had fired him would literally become his property. But something about the gesture felt empty. Let me think about it, Harvey said. After ending the call, Harvey walked to his window and looked out at the Hartford skyline. Somewhere in that urban landscape, Jennifer was showing houses to potential buyers, living a life constrained by the choices she'd made. Somewhere beyond that skyline, Kelvin Hart was probably working some dead-end job under a false name, forever looking over his shoulder. They had both learned what Harvey Stewart was capable of when betrayed. The lesson had cost him everything. Harvey's secretary knocked on his door. "Mr. Stewart, there's a call from your daughter's school. Something about a bridge-building competition." Harvey smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in months. "Put them through." 20 minutes later, he was driving towards Sarah's school to watch her present the suspension bridge model she'd been working on since her parents' divorce. The project had become her way of processing the chaos in her family, and Harvey had helped her refine the engineering principles behind her design. The school auditorium was filled with proud parents watching their children explain complex mechanical concepts with the enthusiasm only 13-year-olds could muster. Sarah's bridge was elegant and functional, incorporating lessons Harvey had taught her about load distribution and stress management. "The key to any strong bridge," Sarah explained to the judges, "is understanding that every part has to work together. If one component fails, the whole structure can collapse. But if you design it right, if you test every connection and plan for every stress point, the bridge can last forever." Harvey watched his daughter with pride, recognizing his own engineering philosophy expressed in her words. But more than that, he saw resilience, the ability to build something beautiful and strong even when the foundation had been shaken. After the presentation, Sarah ran to her father with the first-place ribbon. "Dad, we won. The judges said my bridge was the most innovative design they'd seen in years. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. You did incredible work." As they walked to the car, Sarah looked up at her father with the serious expression she'd inherited from both parents. "Dad, do you miss Mom?" Harvey considered the question carefully. "I miss the person I thought she was. But people aren't always who we think they are, and sometimes we have to build new foundations when the old ones prove unreliable. Like bridges. Exactly like bridges." They drove home together, father and daughter, two engineers planning the next phase of their construction project. Behind them, the wreckage of Miller Construction continued to settle into its new reality. Ahead of them, the future stretched out like an architectural plan waiting to be built. Harvey Stewart had learned that some bridges couldn't be rebuilt. They had to be demolished completely before new construction could begin. He'd torn down the life Jennifer and Kelvin had tried to steal from him. And from those ruins, he'd built something stronger, something that would last forever. The betrayal that was meant to destroy him had instead freed him to become the architect of his own destiny. And Harvey Stewart, as always, had built his victory to withstand any storm. In the end, he'd given them exactly what they deserved, nothing at all. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.